All right, Peter now, figure transformation. And what I want to do is go through a detailed kind of way of what happens to our bodies so we can understand it. And then I'm going to make kind of a separate video after this one on how you can start to address these issues. So all too often what's happening, excuse me, is our hips are becoming way too tight. And they're becoming tight because of our kind of glute max, glute med, kind of any of those kind of external rotators, okay? And that's kind of the job of the glute max. It's a huge stabilizer too. A lot of us usually tend not to have any issues with them. What we have issues with is our kind of hamstrings, our quadriceps, all these secondary muscles if you really think about it. And we're not realizing just how tight the glute gets and how much it dictates how we have to move in our lives. It's constantly being used, constantly under duress. You know, we all too often think if we squat, but if I'm only squatting this far, I'm only training it in that portion, okay? And a lot of times, a lot of people are so tight that they're getting pitched forward. Now we know that the reason for pitching forward is that the glute is basically weak. But why is it weak? Tightness is weakness. And that's what we need to start to understand more, is our tightness is really causing our weakness more than we really need to kind of facilitate exercise in a way. By any means, I'm not saying not to exercise because it keeps the fascia moving and whatnot, but what we need to start doing is kind of understanding how percussion therapy can start to help us regain movement patterns that were once lost, and how we can start kind of bettering our lives. And first to understand that, we need to understand, again, how important our butt and our kind of glutes are and what role they're playing in our lives. All too often our hips are getting tilted and turned and twisted and we're just not realizing it. And too often we're kind of trying to throw movement patterns at it to fix it, when again, if scar tissue is so tight, it's pushing me. So for myself included, I had injured my back and my right years ago. I had injured my knee, which anytime we injure, we get scar tissue that develops. We think the pain goes away and everything is fine. Unfortunately, the scar tissue remains and it forces us to move in certain patterns and restricts our moving throughout our daily lives. And then it just kind of continues. And because we don't kind of move like we used to, it just kind of starts to throw us off more and more. And I've really understood now that it's flexibility that affects our posture. Our flexibility affects our movement pattern. And the only kind of way to fix this is through percussion therapy and basically kind of moving better. And the way that we can do that is kind of start by breaking up the scar tissue, allowing pressure off our secondary. So again, if I squat, I should be able to sit down and be upright, okay? Now, even myself included, I'm kind of hitching forward a little bit. My weight's going to my right. Now, I'm using this just as kind of a gauge to understand kind of where my position is, and then also over the time course of the videos that I'm making, you guys can start to see how I can start to sit up better. I'm not going to force my weight to my right. Again, my right glute has just been shut off for years, I realized, and I was forced to use my secondaries, my quadriceps, my adductors became so tight. And this is, again, all too often what's happening to us. If you think of, you know, if you cut yourself on your lower extremity as we age, it takes longer for it to heal. And that's because the tissue is so tight. So it takes longer for the blood flow to get there to repair the injury. And the other kind of big key part here is our fascia lines. Our fascia lines do not follow the same contour of our muscles, meaning it's not prohibited just to this muscle. It can cross over, okay? So our body kind of needs these lines to promote movement patterns, send signals and whatnot. So all too often what's happening is the tissue is becoming so tight that the fascia lines can't send the right signals. So by the time I got to balance, the signals are offset and I'm trying to balance up here as opposed to stabilizing and pushing through my leg. So very similar happened to me on my right. Okay, I can feel my hip being in. You can kind of see it even, okay? It should be out, but again, the tissue's so tight here that I can't get it to move. I was always thinking that it was in the front part, not realizing that basically I had to loosen up the tissue in my back of my leg in order to get this moving. So that's the first key to kind of, again, kind of moving better, regardless if you're looking for upper or lower. This is our central location, and this is where we got to start. So the more we start to understand what is affecting our movement patterns the most, the better we're going to start to understand how we can, or what we can do to kind of fix it. Another kind of quick one is if I lunge, okay, my hip shouldn't come up. I should be able to keep this hip down and drive through it and back. Okay, I know my right one's tight and it's going to throw me off balance, so I'm going to use this as a little bit of a gauge for myself. So now I can actually feel though myself being able to push and drive through my heel to get that glute active. Now again, kind of reverse lunge. I'm going to come up and back and down. You can see I'm a little wobbly there. I'm going to do that one again. That's what we really want to do, is kind of get all those wobbles out. All too often, that's what's happening. I can feel my adductor in the front kind of kicking in a little bit too much on that. Now again, my right hip is a little bit tighter. Now again, if we can add movements in and then work this, the tissue is going to be more malleable. And that's another avenue that I'm going to start to explore more, is kind of exercise or movement and then working the tissue. So I notice after I cycle, it's much better and easier to kind of open up my fascial lines and break up the scar tissue. So we kind of want to use squats, lunges. Again, even kind of hinging I can use. Okay, my back tends to arch. But again, I got to get my hips in the right place in order to fix that low back arch. And again, it's the scar tissue in my legs, my glutes, that are going to affect that. So if I go straight back, now I can feel it in my calves a little bit more, and behind my knees. Go let my back round, I can get further, but again, I still got to break up this kind of scar tissue. So that's what I'm going to do in the next video, is kind of again just put this all in order of how we can start to break up the scar tissue. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and we'll follow the next one. Thank you.